Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Thursday night with Tanya, because you know I'm gossipy and I love to talk. It's Talking with Tanya. Tonight, we've got a really great, really important show. But before we dive into that, I want to bring out my two most favoritist people on Thursday nights, Lee Cuthbert and Scoop Dawson. Come on up. Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. What you
Good.
got, Scoop?
Pretty good. Just glad I'm not in a blizzard anymore.
That's right. Tell everybody where you're stranded. Well, you're not stranded anymore because it's all melted.
I was stranded in Jackson, Mississippi last week during the Jackson apocalypse, the Jackson
The
snow
way you,
apocalypse.
when you said Jackson, Mississippi, it made me think of that Alabama song Christmas in Dixie, where they go in Jackson, Mississippi.
And guess what else happened to me? I
What?
tried to drive in the snow a little bit, like trying to go around the corner, and I got stuck.
What?
Yeah.
Where were you driving?
One of my good friends stays like right around the corner from my mom, and so I was trying to go to the gas station up this hill. I was almost up the hill, and then the two cars in front of me stopped. And then after that,
Oh,
I
you
just had to
can't
start
stop
sliding
on
back
it.
down the hill. I started sliding back down the hill and trying to turn on the street that I know where he stayed. And that's when my tire got stuck.
Well, it's better you got stuck than sliding into something,
Right.
for sure. Because
But you have to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I just wanted to talk for a minute about Coach Prime and Jackson State's victory in spring football. That was exciting, right?
Yes. And I actually was going to go to the game this Saturday. It's part of the reason why I was like, I can go ahead and stay.
I wondered. Yeah. Yeah. So
But
why do
the
they
game
have
got
spring
canceled.
football?
Hmm.
Why do they have spring football?
I guess to try and give some of those players the opportunity that it was probably like their senior year or something like that. I'm really not sure why they did it, but
Yeah.
Is it actually a spring football season, or was it just like the G-Day game at like Georgia, where they just have a scrimmage in the spring?
oh no, like we were playing, we're supposed to be playing the other teams in our conference.
Yeah, like 6 games.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's crazy. That's crazy. So, it sounds like with doing that, they're probably trying to get back to a little sense of normalcy, right? Which aren't we all? It's been a very long time. I don't know if everybody realizes it or not, but March 13th will really be 1 year that we've been dealing with this, that it has, it's been here longer than that, but March 13th is really probably when we all started to feel it here. And, there's a lot of people who have struggled throughout this. And I think all of us have struggled at one point or another in this. And I think one group of people that's probably struggling a lot, and maybe not everyone realizes it, not everyone knows the signs, are, children and young adults struggling, with their mental health with all of this, because their life is in really chaos right now. So we're going to talk about that tonight. And tonight, to talk about that, we have two of our apprentice cast members. We have Lane Peace, who works in the mental health field. She's also the program director at Kate's Club. And we also have Tamara Hamilton, who is a licensed clinical social worker and who also works at a school. So ladies, why don't you come on up? Hey guys.
Hey.
Awesome to see you. So, Lane, you reached out to me about doing this, and I think it's really something important to talk about. But I kind of want to hear from you, and then I want to hear from Tamara about why it's so important to talk about, specifically with the kids and young adults. Why is it so important to talk about this now?
Well, I really believe the pandemic has caused a mental health crisis in this country. I think we probably already had a crisis, but we know now the rates of suicide are higher. Anxiety is through the roof in our kids and adults. This was last year that 50% of Americans almost said that the pandemic had harmed their mental health, yet the access to care is sometimes not great, and people reaching out and talking about it. So just thought it was really important during these times to have an open discussion about.
Lee has already put the resources in our Twitch stream. Lane provided to us some resources. The numbers are in there. Copy them, paste them into a Word doc, take them down, whatever you need to do. So Tamara, tell us why you think it is so important right now.
Well, I spend my days with children from the age of 3 through 8th grade. So I'm with very young children into kind of that middle school age range child and that early adolescent. And definitely a lot of times parents don't quite see the signs that their child might be going through some things. They don't always catch it. They don't know that their child might have a little bit of a mood issue or anxiety because they think that they think through like what it would look like if an adult had it. And so with children, it's going to be a little different. Kids will have some regression in their behavior sometimes, where a child who's been potty trained might start to have some more accidents. They can have sleep disturbance and their sleep could be messed up. They could just start to be clingier and need more from you. They might not cry all the time, but they might get irritable and agitated. And definitely with adolescents, with older children, adolescents, that can be the primary sign, is just this pervasive irritability that's with them more days than not. I say the marker is more days than not most of the time for at least 2 consecutive weeks. And that's been happening quite a lot with some of our kids. So we also help them understand the difference between depression and anxiety, because I know Lane has seen this too, because they're co-occurring. It's like a lot of times they're just one and you have the other. And it's important to know the difference between the two.
So let me stop you and let me ask you guys this. I know a lot of people probably think of depression, that the pandemic is causing depression. I've heard you guys mention anxiety. What else, as far as mental health wise, what else are you seeing come up? Depression, anxiety,
ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and children trying to go on school online and things like that. So those might be worsened by it. Also, as you start talking about teenagers and young adults, increased use of substance abuse, substances to really cope with those underlying conditions. But those are some of the big ones I would think. And so, kind of that maladaptive coping you see,
so,
especially in teens.
Yeah, and one of the things we haven't dealt with this at my school, but there have been some, kids will do cutting behaviors or self-harming behaviors, and then also with there's just conflict. There could be conflict in the home, and so kids then might be witnessing domestic violence, or they might be receiving a recipient of domestic violence, and we know that child abuse has been one of those things that has gone up during the pandemic as well. And so that's just, again, unfortunate that we haven't had that issue at my school, but I think that what I understand from all the information I'm receiving is that is also on the rise.
So if any of you guys have any questions for Lane or Tamara, any questions about mental health, please feel free to put them in our Twitch stream. So I'm going to ask you a question. As a parent, and my girls are both older, they would both be considered young adults, but as a parent, what do you look for in a child? What are the signs that your child is depressed? What are the signs that they are struggling with anxiety? Because I'm sure there's got to be certain signs you can spot.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to you look at your child to see what's different. I mean, children are always changing, and I get the question probably about twice a week. I don't know what the child is if this is just being 13, or it's the grief, or it's the depression, or is it the anxiety. So that's one thing. It's kind of your pattern is one way and then it stops. So are they sleeping more or not sleeping at all? What I'm seeing with kids now during the pandemic, especially the ones that are in virtual school, they're staying up all night. which is worsening any depression, but a lot of times as a way to cope. They can't sleep, or they're sleeping all the time. They're not maybe taking care of themselves like they used to. They may be, just avoiding their regular social interactions, like isolating, like, no, I don't want to play soccer anymore. No, I don't want to do that, even if the opportunity arises. So they withdraw from activities. Sometimes they'll just be, completely on their phone, shutting everyone out. And you really need to look into that too, whether that's, is that help kids? And they have to have a really open and honest conversation. And they may have to push it. I say when it comes to physical health, we don't give the choice of our kids to go to get their checkups, right? So sometimes we have to push the mental health help as well.
Tamara, what about you? What are you seeing?
Everything that Lane said, it's absolutely everything you look for. And then also too, just a change in behavior. But with anxiety, because she really covered depression pretty thoroughly, like heightened sensory issues, and kids will be more sensitive to things. Some hypersensitivity, hypersensory. Noises will bother them more. Tactile things will bother them more. They just get agitated a little bit more. They might start to pull on their hair or pull their hair out, pick their skin. Those things are right, bite their nails, like all those things are going to happen. And I have a lot of cuticle pickers, that I'll see doing that. We also will start to get kiddos that will have lots of stomach aches or headaches, a lot of physical symptoms, right? So these complaints that are coming through, and I remind the parents that, hey, there's this really important nerve that goes from the mid part of your brain where your anxiety center is at down to your belly. And so that belly ache is attached to your nerve center. And so the tummy aches and the problems that are in your belly is really that gut feeling that's saying something's not quite right. I'm off a little bit. And then again, the other things that I had mentioned, regression in behavior, not sleeping, all of those things can add to anxiety. Little bitty kids aren't going to come out and say, I'm worried about. That isn't going to happen. And now an adolescent will, or an older kid might, but little kids are going to just show it to you in their behavior.
So what about in young adults? And Lane, I was asking you about this. I was asking both of you guys before we went live, what is technically considered a young adult? And you said 18 to 30, but really it's like that 18 to 25, your age group. Do the symptoms sort of mirror in children and young adults, or is there something different that maybe happens because they're a little older, feel like they should maybe have it pulled together a little bit better?
Yeah, I think, some of them would be similar. I know young adults who bite their nails down to the quick, but you can also see OCD behavior. Some of that it's an anxiety disorder. So washing hands, obsessive tidiness, and they get more anxious, and that's how they soothe themselves. Especially anxiety seems to be, I think, and Tamara can, if you agree, it's more the sleeplessness, and the depression is more the sleepiness, so sometimes you can see that's, I haven't slept for days, drinking a lot of coffee, which actually makes anxiety worse. And I'm bad about this. Like I'll be anxious one day and I'm like, why am I so anxious? I've had a pot of coffee already. And then I have stress. This so many times in college students, they're on that caffeine. Maybe they're taking ADHD medicine. So they're really hyped up, and it actually makes their anxiety worse, a lot of that.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting because I are teaching themselves online, much like younger kids would be doing, but it's something that, junior, senior level classes in college, they're major classes. They are pulling out the book. They're not really having these lectures. This semester, she's going to campus, I think 1 day a week for each class, but it's been tough. And it's
really hard. And one of the things that we know about well-being, right? One of the most important factors in well-being is our connection to other people. And, you know, we really, even though we were doing this and we're doing our best, but it's not the same as a physical touch from someone. You know, there's wonderful hormones that are released in our brains that we get, that it's oxytocin. It's called the love hormone. It's the hug hormone. It's like we get that when we have connection with other people. And, you know, and while we have this other thing, we have this other cumulative effect of this hormone that can make us feel icky and not feel so great, cortisol, and we don't have a way to really get rid of it right now, right? I mean, it's just kind of, it's just this cumulative effect of that, and we don't have the natural thing that can help us get rid of it going on. So we have to work really hard to take care of ourselves right now and take extra, still building their resilience. And so this is probably one of the biggest things they've ever been challenged by. And they're still building.
I feel as though for my daughter who is in college, I feel like she is losing a year and a half of her life. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is that UGA sent the kids home right after spring break last year. It's not back to normal. It's not. And, you know, these are what are allegedly the best years of their lives, right? That's what they've grown up hearing. Mm-hmm. That's what they've grown up hearing. And it becomes they are trapped in their apartments on these Zoom lectures. They are doing all this homework. And it's just, you know, these are the kids who came through the upward sports where everybody gets a trophy, everybody's a winner. But I have to tell you, looking at
absolutely.
Yes.
And, you know, kids aren't resilient. Adults aren't, we're not resilient automatically. And you hear this phrase, oh, children are resilient. They're young, they're resilient, they'll be fine. But unless we help build those factors of resiliency, like having that connection with another person, with, you know, different things that help them become resilient. We know facing adversity in itself is one thing that will help them become resilient, but they really need skills to look at this from that perspective, like, you know, because you're right. I have a college student too. You're missing out on all the great things about college, the social interactions, your lectures in your class, the favorite. I mean, you know, these kids didn't want to go. I mean, some kids love going to school online. A lot of them didn't. And now they're faced with that. And those things of just walking across campus and seeing people and having music playing, all those things that go on in a college, you know, they're not getting. So they're kind of not getting the positive where they're still got all this, oh, I still have to do all this schoolwork and I still have to live without my mom's home cooking maybe, or all these things. But I don't get, I mean, even the dining hall that my daughter loved, we just said, don't do a meal plan because they're giving you boxes to go take back to your place. Yep. So.
And I think, you know, some of our best stories came from college, right? So it's like, you know, they're not really getting a chance to make some of those good, fun memories that they're going to sit around a campfire and talk about 30 years later, you know, so.
They're not. And, you know, this is a lot of my worry for these kids, like as a whole. Mm-hmm. These young adults that have gone out, they're at college, they're supposed to be living their best life. They're not. We know it. I mean, none of us are really living our best life right now, right? But in college, you know, you start to form these bonds, you form relationships, different things. They're not doing that for a year. There's been none of that. I mean,
well, maybe there'll be like an explosion of grad school, you know, people who go to grad school, like to try and have I mean, the repercussions could be anything weird like that.
That is such a good point.
5-6 year bachelor degrees, you know, kids extending their bachelor degrees into like 5 or 6 years.
Yep.
And, you know, I don't think it's, you know, financially, sometimes that's not practical for all families, but if it is possible and practical, you know, why not? Sometimes I think even, you know, if your child is dealing with a mental health issue and they're in high school and all you can think is, no, they have to get, you know, past their junior year and it's the most important year and they've got to get into all these colleges. What about lessening some of the pressure? Because some of that anxiety that kids are having and young adults are having is the pressure from parents and other adults around them is, oh, this is the next step. What are you going to do now? So that kind of unrealistic pressure, especially now, is really heightened this anxiety. And so I think it's time to be understanding of that without saying, oh, you're this soft because you can't cope. But what are we going to do? What can you do for yourself to cope? My daughter said this semester, I'm just going to get out and walk every day. I'm going to do something physical. And we know that the brain connection to doing something physical is awesome for your mental health.
Yeah.
Well, I think another thing, and I want your advice on how to do this, is I think one thing we have to do for our kids is to tell them it's okay to not be so hard on themselves, because a lot of times they're their worst critic
by far.
Like, how do you make them understand it's okay? Nobody's going to die if you make a C.
You give them a message, but unfortunately, like, I wish that we could make our kids think something, because, and by the way, my oldest turns 30 tomorrow. So, and so I have had many, many moments where I wish I could take a message and put it inside his brain so that he would know, but we can't do that. But we can model for them, like, those kind of things. We can show them through our own choices in our own lives, and we can validate this experience. I think that it's important just to validate that it is hard. I mean, it's just hard, and that things are being lost, and I like to, like, I just want to hear it from them. Like, sometimes we don't need to always give advice or fix something as parents. Sometimes we just need to be present with them and just hear it and just listen. And, like, it's hard, and just validate it.
And trying to listen without trying to fix it. And sometimes just giving people a word for maybe what they're feeling. I don't know, feeling in yourself of what you're feeling is actually helps you feel better. So just naming what you're feeling can be really helpful.
Journaling can be a great resource for people.
Yeah, I will say it was interesting when you were talking about the hug and the hormone that releases, because I have my younger daughter, who is still at home, say you peaked in high school, just trying to make like, I mean, because there's nothing any of us can do about it. It's sort of, it is what it is. But what's interesting is she gives me hugs and calls them love-ums. And this just started during the pandemic, and she hugs my husband and calls them hug-ums. And she's like, do you need your love-um? Do you need your hug-um? She's just become, and this is my tough kid. This is my kid that has always just sort of been like, I'm good, I can do it all. The past year, she has become so, like, loving. Some might call it clingy. I will call it loving. And I think that has been her coping mechanism, for lack of a better term. And I mean, are there,
you got to put your foot down. You got to stop that right now. Yeah, you can't
Tanya
have a
really
soft.
likes the hug. She likes the hug.
The way she's describing it, it's like she's like an addict. She's an addict.
Yes.
In her fix.
She wants one right now.
I would charge everybody to do, if you have somebody to hug tonight, hug them for, like, is it 20 seconds or something? Like, do not break away for a good 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And afterwards, you will feel better. So that is helping everybody in the home.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, are there, I say this to ask, are there coping mechanisms like this that parents should look out for in their kids, in their young adults, and really be okay with, and just be kind of like,
yeah. And if they regress a little while, that's fine. We know when I work with grieving children, a lot of them regress, even teenagers. And I tell the parents a lot of times they probably won't be 16 sleeping in your bed, or they won't go, they will whatever happens, quakes. And these are big events that make life never the same for them. But we can look at, talk about ways in the past people got through them, not minimizing their experiencing now by saying, oh, but your grandfather lived or your great grandfather lived through this time, but saying, you know, people get through things and we're going to get through it. We're going to get through it as a family. One thing I wanted to circle back as coping is having routines in your life, urging your young adults to have routines. But if you have kids at home, keeping routine, because that's one thing the pandemic did away with. And kids really do thrive on routine.
Mm-hmm. I think that's
never
really
realized
important, Lane, because I had to do that at my school with like making sure, like with the virtual kids when we were virtual, was like, please keep them on a routine. That's the most, it's going to be really important for them. And also I was going to say that with the regression, so when kids start to slip with some things, like little kids might, like I mentioned, they might start to have some toileting issues, and like, now all of a sudden they're having problems. What I like to remind parents is don't go down a shaming route, right? I mean, it's not something where we want to punitively respond to that. We want to nurture that.
Oh, for sure. I want to circle back around to Lane. You said something in the beginning about how, you know, a lot of times people have felt like it was a little bit hard to find someone to talk to find someone to sort of help them. Like maybe they recognize it, but they don't know where to reach out to. And we've posted like 3 resources in our Twitch stream, but I want you to kind of talk us through, like, what are y'all's recommendations for like children? If you have children that you're seeing, they may not be coping as well as you would hope that they would be, or young adults, like, what's the first step? Because I know a lot of people are also afraid of being medicated. They don't want to be medicated, but they may want to talk to someone. What's the first step? Where do they go?
Well, you know, as therapists, we don't medicate. That's for psychiatrists and medical doctors. So the first step is, you know, talk therapy. So if your child's in school, reaching out to the school counselor like Tamara, who may have recommendations for therapists in your community. So people who work well, talking to people. One thing I wanted to bring up about this generation, this Gen Z generation, is they're not really afraid to talk about mental health. I think from their perspective is changing. They're talk to their friends about what their therapist told them. There's not this stigma of going to therapy anymore. So that's huge. I think we have come a long way in that. So talking to friends. If your daughter is struggling and you might say, well, you know, I'm not really sure about a therapist, they, you know, or your friends seeing someone they like, you know, talking to your adult friends. I mean, a lot of times I know as adults, we might find people like doctors and therapists through our friends, you know, that recommend them. And any other, you know, organization, if you're involved in with your children, you know, a lot of times they have lists. And these lines are, you know, kind of the crisis line, but they are happy to refer you to mental health. This is not just like for people who are suicidal. All these lines are ways if you just need help, and they can give you a list of referrals. And when you reach out for therapy, know that for your child, it may look different. They may play with someone for the first several sessions, just play. A teenager may be playing cards with his therapist, and you're going, I'm paying how much money to do this? But they need to build trust, and they need to build rapport. So if you're reaching out for yourself or someone else, give it a try. Interview people, call people, see your feel for them. If it doesn't work out, you know, everybody's not a fit for everyone, even when it comes to therapy. Really find out, you know, kind of their philosophy is medication is something you're concerned about. How do you feel about that?
And this is something that I think is important for people to know. A therapist does not prescribe medication. That would be a psychiatrist.
Right, exactly.
Okay, because I think a lot of people, parents, calling them out. I think a lot of times they may be afraid to make a phone call because they don't want their child medicated. So they need to be looking for like a licensed therapist,
right?
Not a psychiatrist. Yeah, it's important to note. So I think we've covered a lot about kids. I want to talk about adults. I want to talk about adults because I think this has been hard on a lot of adults. So raise your hand if you feel at some point during this pandemic you've probably been depressed. So I think I want to touch on, what happens in adults, especially an adult who generally led a happy life, someone who has no history with any sort of depression, anxiety. This could trigger it in anybody, y'all. Working from home, being locked down all the time, it can trigger it. What are some of the things to look for in yourself as an adult to notice, or that maybe you should notice in your partner, your spouse, anything like that? What are some of the things?
So one of the things I just did this, it was interesting because I did a workshop with our students on cognitive distortions, when our thinking starts to get kind of twisted and starts to really give us messages that are separating us from our reality. And it's things like magnification, where we're going to magnify certain things in our lives, or we're going to overgeneralize. And when we overgeneralize, we're saying things like, well, everybody and always, and this never. And we use these big loaded words. We might do things where we start to jump to conclusions. Well, I just know this is going to happen. We start to mind read. We start to think like, oh, I know that they're thinking this. I just know that this is what they're thinking. And the only thing that's left in the bowl is negativity, negative thoughts, negative ideas. And we let all the other stuff wash away. And those are the yes butters. You'll start to talk with people and you'll be like, well, we can do this. And it's like, yes, but that isn't going to work. Or yes, but this isn't going to be the way it's going to work for me. And then there's blaming and shaming and labeling. And that's where confrontation can start to come in, and we start to have conflict with our spouses or with our children, even just like where the heightened emotionality, and we'll start to blame and shame and do those kind of things. And then emotional reasoning is a really interesting one, where we don't feel well, but then we start to look for reasons around us why we don't feel well. And I don't feel well, so it must be because of that. I'm not feeling right, so it has to be because of that. And it just also, that adds obviously to confrontation too. So I try, and when I did this with the kids, I started telling our parents about it, and they were like, we did it with the parents, and the parents were like, okay, what's that book where I can read that this is about? Because they're recognizing their own thinking is really off. And I think that's one of the first things you can start to track and see. And then there's the other common signs of depression: sadness, lethargy. And then anhedonia is a really interesting symptom. Anhedonia is when we lose interest in our life. We lose interest in things that we normally had pleasure and interest in.
Exactly.
And so if you normally have pleasure and interest in playing Scrabble, you don't really care if you're going to do it or not. If you enjoyed cooking, you don't really care if you're going to do it or not. You just kind of become blah, and you lose that sense of living with that. And that's
no joy. You lose your joy.
Yeah, that's how I would describe it, is the things that usually brought you pleasure or joy aren't anymore. And there's, without having, a lot of times people say, but I'm not depressed. Like, I'm not, because they have this picture of somebody depressed in the fetal position in their bed. But they also
know why they have that perception is because how it has been portrayed to us.
Right. And I remind people, it's because depression actually is mild, moderate, and severe. All conditions are. And so you can go to work, but it will have an impact. Concentration is a big one. People can't concentrate. Like, they just lose their focus. And that's a huge one for people. Your sleep gets messed up. You're just not sleeping as well. And you're not, maybe you're overeating a little bit. Maybe you're going carb loading. A lot of people love carbs around that time because carbs are pleasurable, and it kind of gives us a little bit of natural pleasure. So we just, and then the other thing that I think is a huge thing is starting to do habitual things that aren't so healthy. Like maybe drinking a little more wine, smoking a little bit more, like just these things that can kind of start to creep up on you that can start to become problems.
Yeah. And I would say, you said this, mentioned this before, Tamara, but I think it's really important because sometimes depression can come back out as irritability and anger. So sometimes it's much easier, you just find yourself more angry at things. You're picking fights, or you're not able to let something go with anybody living in your house or your friends, that you take things more to heart, but you also are, I tell kids a lot, teenagers a lot, that like probably that person that bumped you in the hall and you got in a huge fight with, it was not that person. It was you're like slightly annoying. Sometimes it can, that the steam comes out.
Yeah. And it really doesn't matter how the dishwasher is getting loaded, just as long as the dishwasher gets loaded. Like, it's this overemphasis of the small things that are just kind of, when you step away from it and you look at it, you're like, this is stupid. But we have this hypersensitivity where we're going to react to these silly small things.
See, I think this is all such like great information to know, because I really like the way, you guys were describing signs of it. It almost sounds like anytime you put a finite word to it, you never, you always, and it seems like you want to assign blame. It seems like it becomes like the blame game. I mean, these are like signs that, I think we can all look for in ourselves and say, is this a pattern? Right. Is this becoming a pattern in my day-to-day life? Because we are 1 year in right now. We're 1 year in. I don't think we're close to the end. And, we've made it a year. We can keep going.
Yeah. And another thing is catastrophizing. So that's when we think like this is never going to end. And I have been guilty about saying that sometimes. I'm like, this is never or am I ever going to be back to a normal life? But when anything happens that we just make, this is again, those kind of finite words of this is never going to be better. So we do have to keep hope, and that's really important.
And I do think there is hope.
Yes, there is. The things. Yeah. But what can you do in the meantime? Really incorporate, just vow, even if you have to make a pledge with a friend, to what are you going to do for your healthy coping? Is it getting outside at noon, getting off the day and computer if you're working from home and going on a walk? Is it planning, I have book club. We started book club again, but we are sitting very far away in my front yard, but we are having book club and we're outside. Is a bonus, so.
And I
love that you said that.
Don't make any big decisions wearing this, right? Because people will start to think they got to change their life or do something big right now. And now's not the time. You don't do that right now. There's too much going on. Like, it's just, it's not the time to do it.
I appreciate that a lot. I've been thinking about selling everything and getting a mobile home.
Don't do it, Lee.
Don't do it.
Did you watch that movie? It depends, but
don't do it, Lee. Don't do it.
Don't do it. Okay. All right.
I think they've already said people who moved during the pandemic, some of them are already regretting it, because you thought, I have to, do something different. But
Well, and we had a really weird political year too. And I think whatever your persuasion is, it was very divisive and very angry on both sides. And I felt a lot of fatigue from that as well. So it's been a really intense year.
Very intense year.
It has been. That's a really great way to put it. It's been intense on every level.
So one of the things that I think is important to consider, what Lane is talking about, like making sure you're doing all this wellness stuff. And I say you gotta try and do enough to balance it out, right? Keeping the balance in this. It's like, and so you have to do a little bit more, right, to balance out where we're at with all this, and really make big effort into taking care of yourself and doing what you can do.
Hey, do improv.
Yeah.
I wrote a blog this month for Kate's Club, for next month rather. It's our self-care month. And I wrote about doing improv and how much it's helped me as part of my self-care. Because when you're doing it, you have to be completely present and mindful. And you can't be thinking about work. You can't be thinking about your kids. You really have to be present. So I'm going to plug our classes at the same time.
That's right.
I think it's like super important to remember that. It sounds so cliche to say, find something that brings you joy, but honest to God, that is the truth right now. Just like you said, you're having book club in your front yard. It was so nice when we were doing ponds, and we're about to start doing ponds again. So nice to just be outdoors with everyone and feel like, you know, we're okay. We're socially distancing. We're outdoors. We're not, you know, we're not doing anything crazy, but I'm around people. I'm around people, and I feel like there's no anxiety on my end because I'm outdoors and I'm wearing my protection. I think you have to really focus on that. And there's no shame in doing anything that brings you joy. I think that's what's super important for adults to know. There's no shame in doing whatever brings you joy. And I think it was really interesting when one of you said that, you know, Gen Z has made it very accepting to talk about mental health and all of this. I think Gen Z has made it very accepting to talk about basically anything.
That's true too.
It is amazing the stuff that they will talk about, and you're just like, what? You don't even know about it, and you're like, okay. But it's great. It's great that they are free enough that they can do that. And I would say, you know, I've encouraged both of my girls, let's talk about it, whatever you want to talk about. I mean, do you think it's important for parents to remember right now, let's talk about it, for parents to remember that it's okay to talk about whatever. It might make you grossly uncomfortable to talk about it with them because they need to talk about it.
Yes. And I would say that's where it's hard because, you know, when parents are dealing with their own stuff, and I would say all the time, like, that's why listening is really the best thing. And lean into empathy, lean in long way. So just lean in and listen. And recognize, like, if you're stirred up and you've got ideas about what they're saying, maybe just wait and just listen, hear them, and let them talk to you. If you have a kid that's talking to you, then be happy, man. You're winning. That's winning.
And when I hear teenagers, they'll say, you know, I won't talk to my mom because she'll freak out. You know, when they open up to me or they open up in a group, and I think we've all been there. So trying not to freak out, it's like the biggest thing I did with my kids. And sometimes they'd tell me stuff in the car, I'd be driving and go, oh my God, you want to freak out. You're freaking out inside, but you're trying to be, oh, well, what did you think about that? Or what, you know, you're doing like, oh, okay, well, but they're going to stop when they feel judged and when they feel unheard, or that you just freak out, whatever that looks like. So
that's right. And you can't make it about yourself, because I know that a lot of parents, little kids will start to talk, and then it goes to, well, you know, this has been really hard on me, and this has been a really tough thing for me. And so you have a kid who's starting to open up to you, and you make it about yourself and have empathy for you. And so that ain't going to happen.
I want to ask you this, and I want to ask you this because I wonder if it's of something. I try to always make it, we're going to get through this, because I never want them to feel like they're alone. Even if every 4-letter word imaginable is going through my head as I'm saying it, I always try to say, we're going to get through this. Is it important to say things like that to make your kids, your young adults, feel like they're not alone?
I think it's a good thing to say. Other phrases that are really great to say are, I believe in you. I believe in what you can do. I believe that you'll be able to take care of this, and I will be here with you. You're not alone in this. Just reassuring them that you're hearing them and that you're gonna be by their side, and some kids like to hear that we're in this. Some kids might want to just hear that that they can handle it, that they've got it, and it just kind of depends on what they're sharing. And but really what they need to know is that, okay, I'm safe. I'm able to share this with you, and it's a safe space to talk about it. And I know that you got me, and that's what they need.
Oh, I love that. We are going to end it right there. Guys, this has been fantastic because I think this is a topic that is really, really overlooked a lot, and it should not be, because we are all, I say this to everyone, we are all struggling in our own way right now. And it is okay to struggle. It is okay. We're all figuring this out. I don't think any of us ever thought we would be living through a pandemic, but we are, and we're going to come out of it. That's what we all have to know. So thank you both so much, and we will see you back here next Thursday. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next Thursday.